Today, we have someone who is also making a great impact in Auckland and around the world. And we're going to get to know him a bit better today. And so I'm going to invite Morris to the stage. So let's give him a Gracegate welcome. All right, Morris, I'm sure that probably most people in this audience don't really know who you are. And could you maybe give us an intro, who you are? Do you have any kids, family, and what are some of your interests?
Hi everybody, I'm Morris Curtis, and I was born in Rawene in the far north, and I have got my wife and two children here, my wife Linda, and we've got two children and one on the way, Aria who's 5, Elle who's 3, and another one about 10 weeks away. So yeah, excited about that. Bought the People Mover, we've had it for a week.
So Morris, I asked Norman, I said to him, hey Norm, we'd love to interview you. And straight away he pointed a finger and he said, no, let's interview Mo. So I'm not exactly sure why, but I'd love to know a bit more about, I know you've actually come to Gracegate before, and for those that can remember, he spoke a bit about neuroscience. And from the last time you came to Gracegate and shared with us what you were doing, what you're up to now.
Yeah. So a lot of the work that I do is in the neuroscience arena. I am very interested in what goes wrong first in the brain. So long before someone goes to the doctor with a movement disorder that will be described as Parkinson's disease, or a memory loss that we'd think of as Alzheimer's disease, people have usually lost their sense of smell. And this actually happens 6 to 10 years before they have any major problem elsewhere in the brain. And so if my work worked out brilliantly and everything went to plan, then what we would have is people going to the doctor having lost their sense of smell, and we would treat that rather than waiting for 6 to 10 years and then say, sorry, the Parkinson's is too advanced, you can have this drug, but we're not going to be able to properly treat the Parkinson's disease. So we're really wanting to get in very early into one of the hardest areas to get into. The brain is heavily protected. It has lots of fences around it so that you can't get drugs in there easily. It's a very difficult area to treat. And so we basically want to be able to treat the problem really early on so it never becomes a late on problem.
All right. And so currently you are working for Auckland University, is that correct?
That's right, yeah.
And so what does an average week look like for you? What do you get up to there?
Yeah, that's a good question. I'd say in my current role there isn't an average week. Every week's different. I took on, 18 months ago, took on the role of Head of Department of Anatomy and Medical Imaging. So in that department we do all of the undergraduate training for medical doctors in anatomy. We train first year radiology registrars, so these are medical doctors who are finished and now they're specialising in radiology. And we teach them advanced anatomy and also physics because we have a medical imaging division in the department that looks after imaging, MRI, CT, this kind of thing. And so those are sort of that's the diversity of the role. But within the department there's 80 staff, and so about 40% of my time goes on just managing staff, making sure that there's principles and processes so people can do their best work. And then I run my own research group, which consists at the moment of 16 people, specifically focused on the early changes that occur in the brain in Alzheimer's and Parkinson's disease. So apart from my kids, the thing that gets me up in the morning is actually running the research group. That's what I'm most passionate about. But the other work's really important too. You know, things don't work in a vacuum, and they don't work without really good structures. Providing clarity and just making it easy for people to know what the pathways they need to go down to get certain jobs done, etc. Yeah.
And so Mo, can we go back a bit? You said that's sort of what gets you up in the morning. You're really passionate about research and discovering more about the brain. Could you share with us, like, where did that come from? How did it all start? Why are you so passionate about what you do?
Yeah, my career trajectory actually started out in radiography, which is interesting that now I'm back doing a medical imaging kind of arena of work. But I was walking home from riding my bike actually home from school one day, and someone drove up beside me, and the window wound down, and it was someone who was a couple of years ahead of me at high school, and she'd been studying radiography for a couple of years, and she said, "I heard you might be interested," because she actually knew that my cousin was one, and so I was a bit interested in this, and she said, "Well, the applications are due tomorrow, so yeah, put an application in." I was a sixth former, and so had another year to go of school, but I thought, oh, well, I'll throw the application in, and blow me down, they selected me. So that was the start of the journey. But when I was a second year radiography student, I did a compulsory course on neuroscience, and at about the same time I went to a rest home actually to visit someone, and saw in the distance someone who had Huntington's disease, which is a very severe movement disorder. This person was about 40 years of age and was going to live out their life in an old folks' home. And I just thought, wow, what a shocker! That's terrible. And so I looked up the university calendar and saw that there was someone at Auckland University doing research on Huntington's disease, and that turned out to be Sir Richard Fall. Some people may know of Sir Richard, and so I approached him, and about every 6 weeks for a year and a half, I went and knocked on his door and just said, "Have you got a master's position for me?" And eventually, I wore him down, and he gave me one. So that was sort of the route into neuroscience.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Love it. You guys enjoying this? Now, Morris, I know something really significant happened last week, and I know you probably won't tell everyone about this, but I'm going to ask you to please tell everyone about this. So could you share with us, what happened last week?
Yeah, so at the end of last year, I was made a professor, which is the highest sort of rank, I suppose, in the. Thank you. At the university, which was a big deal, and although my career path was always to want to treat brain diseases, when you pick up a few bonuses along the way, like promotion and so on, you take them. You know what I mean? You don't say no thanks. So last week I gave my inaugural professorial lecture, which is something that you officially give, usually at least at the University of Auckland, you give it in the winter following the time when you're promoted to professor. And so approximately 250 people showed up. I was gobsmacked that many people came to hear me speak, and I presented for about an hour on my background and how I got into science. And I thought it would be, it's an important occasion on the university calendar. The dean puts on his nice robes, and the academics dress up, and it's quite a formal occasion. But it was one of the best nights of my life. It was just fantastic. So it exceeded expectations, and to feel the support of your friends and patients and colleagues and so on is tremendous.
Awesome. And Morris, I don't know much about professors in any of their contexts at Auckland University, but a rumor that Norman actually shared with me is that the youngest person to be a professor at Auckland University was, am I correct, 39 years old?
That I'm aware of.
Okay.
Yeah,
And Mo's 40 now? Is that correct? Ever?
Yeah.
All right, so I think that's such an achievement. And I love where that vision was birthed. It was birthed in a place where you want to make a difference in people's lives. And it's completely different to what we do here at church, but it's also so very similar. And most importantly, I know you're also passionate about God. And maybe you could just share a bit more about your faith and what you're learning and discovering, about God.
Oh, that's a good question. I always feel put on the spot with that particular question. I think for me over the last couple of years, the importance of putting people first. You can. There's a whole lot of KPIs that I have to work to, key performance indicators that I'm judged on every year, and probably you're the same, judged on something, output, whatever area you work in, there'll be things that determine whether you're good at your job or bad at your job. And I think the importance of just looking after people in that process has been really prominent on my mind. And I think partly going through this professorial lecture, it kind of came out of it thinking, I just need to support more people. There's all these people here supporting me and have supported me in all sorts of different ways over the years. I just need to get behind people and just, forget about whether or not you perfectly agree with them, forget about whether or not you want to spend hours and hours and hours with them. The reality is that you can probably do something to help them along the way. And so that's kind of been on my heart a bit. I think that if we got more behind people and less behind processes, we'd probably go a long way. Processes are really important though. You can do a whole lot more when you've got good systems and you don't spend all of your time with everybody figuring out where that piece of paper needs to go and who needs to see it. So the processes are important, but actually in the end, the purpose of having the process is that you can get people doing what they need to be doing, what they're passionate about, and what they get up in the morning to do. And so that's where the effort should go. That's been my journey lately.
Love it. And I think that's what church is all about. It's about people. One of the things that I also love about you is I've heard that on a Saturday morning, you generally with the kids at your church and you sharing the story with them almost every Saturday. So we love what you're doing, love that you're making a difference in so many different environments. And just for anyone out there thinking about neuroscience and maybe wanting to get involved in it or thinking, hey, that could be my career path, what would be some advice for them?
Yeah, I think anything in science, it's a very difficult career path. It's challenging because the funding is not certain. You're not selling a product that makes money, which you can then fund your wage with, and so it's a tough career path, but it's also one of the most interesting. Your curiosity in the end is what's going to determine whether or not you're successful or not, whether you see a problem in nature or something that you want to understand in nature or the world. And when you have the opportunity to just sort of relentlessly focus on that or understand it or try and figure out why it is so, that's pretty special. And so I think science is, you don't do it because you can do it, you do it because you have to do it. You get up in the morning and that's just what you have to do. And I think that's important. It's the same with Christianity. You get up in the morning and you just sort of have to live it out somehow. You have to find a way to live it out. So I think spending time to find out what you really want to do in life is actually really important. And I give that advice to students that I teach. Surround yourself by people who want the best for you, but also that are prepared to say that that's not the right path for you. Have you considered, whatever it is? And there's plenty of people out there that can help you with that kind of thing. If you think, that my job's dead end, or it might be a great job, but it's just not, spinning your wheels, then life's short, so why not find the right thing?
All right. Well, thanks so much, Mo, for just taking a few minutes and chatting to us today. Thank you for also just your leadership, what you're doing in Auckland and around the world, and all the best. And thank you just for the time this morning.
Thanks very much.
Cool. It's an honor for me also to have Norman here today. For those who don't know, he's one of my good friends from South Africa, and today he's going to be sharing the message with us. He pastors a church over in Australia and has a huge heart for God and just loving on people and making a difference in people's lives. And he is also a bit of a gangster, so let's welcome Norman to the stage, please. All right.
Good morning, Grace Gate. How's it going? Hey, that was awesome. Thanks, Wes. Thanks, Mo. I learned so much in that, and I'm almost like, hey, just carry on. That was really good. I'm so glad to be able to be here with you. And Grace Gate feels like I now have 3 churches. The one that I currently pastor, and then there was Papatoe that I was at for many years here in Auckland, and then next is Grace Gate. And I love this community. I love what you're doing. I love how you're serving. I love seeing so many young people involved and passionate about God. And had the opportunity last night to be at Fuel and see what they did there. Spent the day yesterday with some of your men looking at our stories and how we can learn and grow and repurpose our pain. And it's just been so awesome. So thank you for the opportunity. Want to say a word of prayer, and then we'll get into our teaching for today. Lord, we thank you that we can be here as we look at different things, tease out realities of life and faith and who we are and where we're moving and what we're doing. We thank you for your presence. We thank you for this community and the spirit that we feel and sense that is here. And we ask that you lead us this morning in Jesus' name. Amen. So you guys have been talking the last few weeks about catalyst, how to be a catalyst for change, a leader in your own sphere, in your own right, in your own place. And I wanted to quickly recap on some of the things that have been shared. Now, I hope I get this right. It was Azalia that started off, and she shared that a vision was born, looking at the story of Nehemiah, and we heard that as well here with Morris, that any leadership, any catalytic change that happens in life starts with a vision that is born. And that vision often comes out of a question. And the question that Azalia asked is, what bothers you? Is there something in the world that you look at and you go, it shouldn't be that way? That's not right. Often that is the place where vision is born. What breaks your heart? And she gave us 3 things to remember. 3 things we can learn from Nehemiah's response when he saw something that broke his heart. We can sit down and cry and wrestle with it. And I love that it's an okay way to respond. Let's wrestle with it. We can kneel down and pray. Take it to the place where it can actually be thought out, wrestled with, and a difference be made. And then stand up and act. Then we spoke about the cost of vision. And this is a very true reality. Anytime a vision is born in your heart, you're going to have to ask yourself the question and face the reality that it's going to cost something. It's always going to be a trade. We as human beings, we only have a limited amount of time, a limited amount of resource. So everything in life is going to be a trade. There's going to be a cost. But at the end, it's worth it. And he said this, investigation impacts initiation. Revelation requires responsibility, and courage conquers criticism. So thanks, Wes, for reminding us of that. Then last week, Jordan spoke about achieving vision together. Any vision worthwhile is done in community, is best achieved and realized when we work together. And we see this in the story of Nehemiah. This man who was a cupbearer for a king in a distant country, very sort of insignificant role, but when this vision was born, he decided, I need to go back to my homeland, to Judea, and make a difference. And he started influencing people that were around him, got to this place, made a difference. When he was there, pulled everyone together and started pursuing this vision. Today we're going to touch on another aspect of being a catalyst leader, and it's called the essential ingredient. The essential ingredient. When we were kids, my brothers and I, we used to love playing sports. That's kind of what we did all day, every day. My mum tried to teach us and give us skills in the home, like cooking and cleaning. But of course, we just ran outside and wanted to play sports. But one holiday I remember, we were like, okay, Mum, we're gonna give this a go. And we said, Mum, we want to bake a cake. And she was like, hey, sure, that'd be great. Here's all the ingredients you need. And here's the recipe. You guys go for it. Bake a cake. I think I was probably 6. My brothers were 8. And we decided we're going to bake this cake. And so as we're going through, we're reading the ingredients, looking at everything that was there, putting the things in. And we saw the things we really loved. We loved the sugar that was going to go in the cake. And we saw the butter and we were like, yeah, we're going to put some butter. We loaded it with butter. We saw all these different things and we were like, yes, this needs to go in the cake. And of course, there was the icing and all of that. But then we saw an ingredient and we were like, what? We don't want to put that in the cake. And it was salt. And we were like, no, why would you put salt in a cake? That just doesn't make sense. It didn't make sense to our little minds. So we were like, nah, we're going to leave the salt. Anyway, and we carried on and we baked this cake and we were watching it in the oven. It looked like a cake. It smelled like a cake. And when it came out, it was hot and spongy like a cake. And then we cut into it and we ate it and tasted it. And it just didn't taste like a cake. Because what did we miss? The essential ingredient, which we thought, we were like, nah, that's a little bit, was actually salt. Salt that brings out the flavors, salt that neutralizes some of those strong flavors, salt that pervades everything and amplifies the flavors. And we misunderstood and didn't realize that was actually the essential ingredient. And we learned a valuable lesson. Now, this is true in the leadership space. Often we see people who, because here's something that we often confuse when it comes to leadership. We often think that leadership equals position. It's a misnomer that there is in leadership. That leadership equals position. If I can just reach that level, if I can just be promoted, if I can just get that position, if I were in a position of authority, then I'd be able to do this. I'd be able to effect this change. I'd be able to make a difference. But you see, most often, it's not position that matters. Because here's what we realize in life. People will obey. We obey people that are in positions. But we follow people with influence. The essential ingredient. Position is optional. Influence is essential. And influence has nothing to do with a position. Influence has everything to do with your relationship with people, the way they view you and perceive you, and has everything to do with when you see it and you experience it, there is a consistency between what you see and what you experience, what you hear and what you witness. Influence. And many people get this mixed up in leadership and they think, if I could just have that position, then I'd be able to make a difference. But often they miss the fact that position is optional, influence is essential. So how do we become people of influence? What do Catalyst leaders understand about influence that allows them to step into that, to live that out, and to be leaders that influence and not just hold position? We're gonna look at the story of Nehemiah, the next part of it, Nehemiah chapter 5. If you have a Bible, you can grab it. If not, no worries. Most of it is going to be up here on the screen. You can just follow along. And I'm going to read a little bit of this section to you, and then we'll get to the verses that are on the screen. And this is in the continued story of Nehemiah. They're trying to build this wall to protect Jerusalem. And at some point in chapter 5, it says, about this time, some of the men and their wives raised a cry of protest against their fellow Jews. They were saying, we have such large families, we need more food to survive. Because what was happening at the time, there was famine in the land, as well as them trying to get resources together to build this wall. This was the vision, the dream that Nehemiah had, to build this wall around Jerusalem, to reestablish the society, the city, the community, and protect them with this wall. And they're like, we don't have enough food. Others said, we have mortgaged our fields, our vineyards, our homes to get food during the famine. And yet others said, we have borrowed money on our fields and vineyards to pay our taxes. We belong to the same family as those who are wealthy, and our children are just like theirs. Yet we must sell our children into slavery just to get enough money to live. We've already sold some of our daughters, and we are helpless to do anything about it, for our fields and vineyards are already mortgaged to others. They came to Nehemiah with this plea and said, we want to be with you, Nehemiah. We want to be people that follow you, but here's our challenge. Here's what's making it hard for us. There are real needs, real circumstances that we're facing that are getting in the way of us getting alongside you and pursuing this vision that you have. Then we read in the next few verses. Nehemiah's response. He said, "When I heard their complaints, I was angry." Something again stirred in his heart. When he heard this, he was like, this shouldn't be. It broke his heart. After thinking it over, I spoke out against the nobles and officials. So who is making it hard for the people, according to this? The nobles and officials, the leaders, the ones who had what? Position and power. These were the very ones that were meant to be looking after the people, but they were the ones that were taxing and impoverishing the people. And Nehemiah heard this and he said, "You guys have mistaken leadership. You think leadership is about position. And when you get into a position of power, you then lord that and make everyone else under you suffer because of your position." That is what made him angry. He said, you might have a position, but you know what? The people might obey you because they're afraid, but they're never going to follow you. The next verse. Then I told them, you are hurting your own relatives by charging interest when they borrow money. Then I called a public meeting to deal with the problem. Nehemiah, being a catalyst leader, here's what he knew. And here's what any one of you who wants to be a catalyst for change will at some time in your leadership have to confront and embrace. And Morris expressed this so well earlier. People are more important than position. People are more important than position. And whenever a tension arises between those two, every catalyst leader knows the direction they need to go. We need to get alongside the people. Because if my position is getting in the way of the people thriving or actually having a meaningful existence, then there's something wrong. So catalyst leaders know that people are more important than position. Nehemiah calls for a meeting of the elders and the nobles, and in front of everyone, he calls them out. And we're going to read the next few verses. And here's what he says. After he calls them out, he then declares this. I myself, as well as my brothers and my workers, have been lending the people money and grain, but now let us stop this business of charging interest. So he's saying, let's actually take something on the chin ourselves as leaders. Let's actually, yes, lend people grain and lend people what they need, but let's not charge interest and so put them into poverty. Let's us take some of the hit, those of us in leadership, by not charging interest. Then he carries on. You must restore their fields and vineyards, olive groves and homes to them this very day, and repay the interest you charged when you lent the money, grain, and new wine and olive oil. See, Nehemiah understood something that catalyst leaders eventually are going to confront and have to embrace. And I love the day and age we're living in. As one leader put it, people today, they tuned in to fake. This is what we call leaders who have position, but they don't have influence. We say they fake. They have authority, but they don't have the ability to influence. And we see a discrepancy, a distance between who they say they are and how they live their life. It's fake. And people today, they smell fake. They're like, we can smell it. Someone faked. Who was it? And Nehemiah is saying, you know what? The tension is here. You are not being influential leaders because you're fake. You're in it for the position. And here's what catalyst leaders know. Values and your ability to lead people and what you're trying to teach them are caught, not taught. It's not what you say that matters or what you declare, it's how you live that out. It's how you live that in your life. I remember I saw this most in teachers when I was at school. You'd have some teachers that would, because they were in a position, they would tell you things, and they'd often tell the guys, hey, don't smoke. Jimmy, don't smoke. I saw you behind the shed there. Don't smoke. And then they'd go outside the classroom. And as students, as kids, we were like, we smelt it. Fake. We were like, don't tell me what I should or shouldn't be doing, but then you go and do that very same thing. Don't say one thing, but not live that out in your life. And this is what Nehemiah is calling the leaders on. He's saying, you say you want to care for, look after the people, but yet in your actions, you're actually putting them into slavery and poverty. You're fake. And the values that we want to live out, and if you want to be an influential leader, then you start embracing this idea that values are caught, not taught. And so as people gather around you and as people are under your leadership, maybe it's in the home, maybe it's in a classroom where you're teaching, maybe it's in the workplace, maybe it's here at Gracegate. Most of what people are going to learn and take away from you as a leader is going to be caught, not taught. So Nehemiah carries on. And then he says this in verse 14 of chapter 5. For the entire 12 years that I was governor of Judah, from the 20th year to the 32nd year of the reign of King Artaxerxes, neither I nor my officials drew on our official food allowance. And he carries on for the rest of the chapter to detail how he receives all the guests and visitors that come in. He cares for and gives of his own grain to the people, but he doesn't take on the food allowance that is due him and due anyone in his position for the sake of the people. He is willing. And this is where people came to Nehemiah. They didn't come to the nobles and those that were in position. They came to Nehemiah because he was a leader of influence, and they could see that in his life. They could see that he was living what he taught. There wasn't a distance between what he was saying and what he was doing. And Nehemiah was quite brave in actually confronting the nobles the way he did. Because here's another tension that faces you and I in this leadership reality. Often there's going to come opportunities or situations like this where there's a hard choice or a hard path for us to take. Either we're going to live up to the conviction, the beliefs, the values that we have, and possibly at the cost of our vision. Because here's what was at stake in this whole story. The nobles could have, when Nehemiah came to them, have said, you know what, Nehemiah? We don't like that you confronted us on this. We don't like that you called us on this. So you know what? You can do this on your own. We're not going to help you. And not only that, we're going to make it hard for you. That's what could have happened. That is what was at stake. Nehemiah, when the people came to him, there was this tension in the leadership space. Do I keep the nobles with me to ensure that I can achieve my vision? That would be the path of least resistance. That would be the easiest road to take and possibly ensure that the vision continues. But that would go against my values. There are times in leadership when you're going to have to navigate this tension. You're going to have to confront, and you will confront this tension. And so many leaders take the path of least resistance. They go, you know what? Maybe if I just turn a blind eye this time, I'll keep the nobles on side and we'll achieve the vision. It's for the greater good, isn't it? But in doing that, they lose their influence. Because what do people do? They smell fake. They smell fake. This was Brie with that food analogy. That's why I keep thinking of food and smells and baking. They smell fake. And so Nehemiah, faced with this tension, the path of least resistance would have been, hey guys, look, I'm going to side with the nobles here because we need to keep them on side if we can achieve this vision. But instead, he goes the path of the right value, the right principle, and says, you know what? Actually, nobles, I'm going to call you out. Let us sacrifice as leaders for the sake of the people. And it could have gone very wrong, where the nobles could have said, that's it, we're not going to work with you anymore. But Nehemiah understood that as a catalyst leader, when you face this tension, the path of least resistance always comes at a cost to influence. The path of least resistance always comes at a cost to influence. I'm going to close by sharing a story. And this is a story where I've seen this lived out in a beautiful way. And I put there just mother-in-law, because that's who I saw it lived out in. At this time, it was a very difficult, tricky time in South Africa's history. It was the transition between the apartheid government and the new government. Many of you might know or might not know, but there was a time when racial discrimination was legalized and a societal norm in South Africa, where the largest segment of the population was limited in where they could go, what they could do, education they could have, and what work or anything they could do because of the melanin in their skin. That was the basis for the discrimination. And this ended with Nelson Mandela, the freeing of Nelson Mandela, and him with the ANC winning the election in 1994. And in the changeover from governments, there was a lot of tension, a lot of turmoil, a lot of things happening. Now, my mother-in-law, in the town where she lived, she had a position of authority. She was the municipal manager, 2IC to the mayor in the town. Basically, the mayor was the spokesperson, the leader. She did all the work. That's kind of often how it works. And so she was the municipal manager. And at this time, they were doing some projects in some of the communities that had been disadvantaged, where they were trying to bring in infrastructure. And this was a huge water project that they're wanting to bring into this community. They were making a dam, and a lot of the pipes had to come through the community. And the council was tasked by the local government to get the approval from these villages. And these villages were ruled and run by chiefs. Local chiefs. So it was still very much a tribal structure where local chiefs would have the authority in these villages. And if you couldn't get the chiefs on board, the municipality had no show of doing anything, because the chiefs influenced the people. And they were tasked with getting this group of villagers on board to have this water project built through their village. And they were having a lot of tension, a lot of opposition. The mayor at the time, he suggested to my mother-in-law, he said, you know what? We have the government behind us. We have the local government behind us. Let's just bring in the bulldozers. We'll bring in the police. We'll bring in the army. We'll keep the people at bay, and we'll just do it. And my mother-in-law, being a catalyst leader, knew that that wasn't going to get the result they wanted. And so the people had requested a hearing, a meeting with the municipality. And my mother-in-law said, let us go and meet with the people. Let us talk to them. Let us hear their needs, hear their concerns, and then maybe we can bring them on side to understanding what it is we're trying to do, that we're actually trying to benefit them and help them in the future. And let's do it that way. Let's not just leverage our position, but let's go and meet with the people. And the mayor was like, this is a bad idea. It's going to go wrong. There's so many things that could go wrong. And my mother-in-law just said, we need to do it. This is the best way forward. So eventually they consented to the meeting. Now, the meeting was still a few weeks ago, and my in-laws in South Africa, my father-in-law's an electrician, and they have an electrical shop. And my mother-in-law, when she's not at the council, used to run the business of the shop. And so she was in the shop one day, in the office, and it was very busy. There were a lot of people everywhere. Most of those that were working in the shop as attendants were serving other people. And this elderly gentleman in sort of ragged clothes, not very well presented, sort of an old hat off to the side, with a walking cane, he came stumbling into the shop, and he was kind of slowly making his way through the aisles, looking for something, but not quite sure what he was after. And my mother-in-law noticed this through her window. She was in the office, and there was a one-way glass window where she could see out, but they couldn't see in. No one knew she was there. And she noticed this old gentleman just sort of hobbling around, and her heart went out to him because all the other attendants were busy. No one was helping him, and he was slowly making his way, but couldn't find what he needed. And so she got up out of her chair and decided, I'm not just going to sit here in the office and let this old guy figure it out alone. And she got up and she went. It wasn't her job, it wasn't her role, but she saw the need that this old guy had, and she got up and went to help him. She came alongside him and she said, "Good afternoon, sir. How can I help you with finding what you need?" And she put her arm around his and sort of stabilized him as they walked along. He then explained to her, this is what he needs, this is what he's after. She took him around the shop and they found what they needed. She then took him to the counter and the attendant was busy with someone else, so she went around the counter herself, helped serve him, and then he went on his way. A few hours later, she was driving to a meeting at a town nearby. And as she drove out of the town, just outside of the border of the town, she saw the same old guy walking down the street, just in the open, walking. The next town was about 20 kilometers away. There were a few villages scattered in between, but he would at least have to walk another 5 kilometers before he found any civilization. And she thought, she knew she would probably be late if she stopped. But she thought, I can't just drive past. I can't let this guy, it's where they live in winter, it's 26 to 30 degrees. Just the other day they said, yeah, it was 42. It's like, well, in summer it gets above 40 most of the time. So it's hot sun, it's dry. So she decides, no, she stops, she pulls up, she opens the door, she helps the old man into her car. She says, I'll take you to where you want to go. You just tell me where you want to go, I'll take you. And she drove him to a village. It wasn't the first village he was going to, it was the second one, so about 7 kilometers from there, and she dropped him off, and then she went on to her appointment. She was late, but she apologized, and she was at her appointment. 2 weeks later, they go to this meeting, her and the mayor, and they're sitting there at a table in front of a hall full of frustrated people. Frustrated people who don't trust the leaders, who have had a history of being abused, subjected, misused, and marginalized by leaders, people in position. And they don't trust whatever they're trying to do. And the mayor, where they're kind of going back and forth, and they're trying to explain, what we want to do is going to help you, it's going to be good for you. And the people are like, no, and throwing different things at them. And the mayor looks at my mother-in-law and says, see, I told you this was a bad idea. We should have just brought the police and the army in and we would have got it done. And the people are still, they're asking questions. The council is trying to explain. When suddenly, I need a cane. Is there a cane anywhere? I'll use my foot. When suddenly, from the back of the room, and my mother-in-law said she couldn't even see where it was coming from, she just heard, and people are talking like, eventually everyone was quiet. And from the back of the room, an old guy stood up with his cane. And everyone else kind of bowed their heads. And then he introduced himself to my mother-in-law and the mayor as the local chieftain over all the villages. And all he said to the people who were now quiet and listening, because he had influence, he took his cane and he pointed it at my mother-in-law. And he recounted the story. This lady helped me when I needed help in her shop. This lady gave me a lift at cost to her own time and her own reputation when I needed help. We can trust her and what she wants to do. And he sat down. And everyone in the building voted the project through. And they got to bring water to the villages and to the surrounding villages through this project. Because my mother-in-law understood those three things that we shared. People matter, not position. She understood that the path of least resistance always comes at a cost to influence. And she also understood how many of you are listening who can guess it? She also understood that values are caught and not taught. And so her living out her values, her caring for people over position, and her deciding to actually go the path that is maybe harder, but that is going to secure influence, was meant that she was a catalyst for change and a leader in this community that brought new possibilities, new realities, and a new way of life for many of the people that she was serving. And so this is my prayer for each and every one of us as we pursue being catalysts. Catalysts and leaders in our own sphere, in our own place. As the band comes up, we're going to sing and celebrate this. May you too realize it is your influence that matters. And your influence has everything to do with character. Character. Your values, your love and care for the people, and that you're not fake. Because people will smell fake. So may we be influencers, catalysts for change in whatever we do, is my prayer.